Okay, so Greg and Bernie and I are finally together on a Zoom call. A little bit of a hiccup getting here, but here we are. And what we're talking about is the sublandlording model as it applies to container storage, as it applies to workshops. And I'm going to share my screen with Greg and Bernie, which will show. So this is a building, as I said a moment ago before we started recording, Bernie, that is about 80,000 square feet. Ignore the 8,000 here because that's just a little bit that we renovated first. So it's an 80,000 square foot building that a client of mine, coaching client of mine, Shaddilac, he bought in Kitchener-Waterloo. He bought it for very little money. I think it was about $1.2 million, and it's 80,000 square feet. That works out to about $15 per square foot. You can't build a doghouse for that, Bernie. Okay? So why was he able to get it so inexpensively? Well, I'm going to show you the next slide. So here's the building a little bit larger now. And on the next slide, whoops, not the next slide, a couple more over. Here it is. You'll see why he was able to buy it so inexpensively. First of all, it's a long, skinny building, and most industrial users want a big rectangle or square, not a long, skinny building. It's not as efficient to organize your affairs in a building that looks like that as opposed to one that's very square. And the other reason why it sold so inexpensively is it only has 11-foot 2-inch ceiling heights, and most industrial users want 18, 20, 24, 26, 28 feet ceiling height, and indeed Amazon in their fulfillment centers goes to 60 feet. So 11-foot 2 industrial building that's 80,000 square foot, you could wait a very, very long time to find one 80,000 square foot user in the industrial space who could use a long, skinny building with substandard ceiling height. But what Shaddy has in mind was the model that, you know, Greg and I have been talking about for some time. That is dividing it up into small spaces, about 500, 800, 1,200 square foot in terms of workshops. And you can see these are just some hand sketches that Shaddy did. And within a week or so of buying it and coming up with this idea, he started renovating it to create these mini workshops. So one of the things that you could do with this sublandlording building, instead of buying a building like this, you could find one in Saskatoon that is empty and is having trouble leasing. And I think where Greg is going is rather than, you know, spending $1.2 million to buy a building or $1.5 billion to buy a building, that you could go to an existing, you know, REIT. Do you know what a REIT is, Bernie?
No.
A REIT is a real estate investment trust.
Oh, okay.
So there'll be lots of these industrial buildings that are owned by large companies. A REIT, real estate investment trust, a publicly traded real estate firm, a pension fund, an insurance company, maybe even a bank. And I don't mean through a foreclosure or power sale, just they own real estate. And Greg, that is the ideal landlord for you. Because if you go to a private landlord with your idea, he or she might say, gee, that's a great idea, Dr. Yelland. I think I'll just steal it and do it myself. You know, very likely. I would hope not, but certainly a possibility. So what you could do is you could go to one of these big REITs and say, look, you're having trouble renting this building for whatever reason. Maybe the ceiling height is too low. The loading docks are not very good. The location isn't perfect. But Bernadette and I have a plan. And our plan would be to divide up this space into you know, small workshops and rent them out. And so we would work together with you, Mr. Landlord or Ms. Landlord. You with me on this so far, Greg?
Yep.
So the best thing for you to do, in my opinion, if you were to do something like this, whether it's you and John, or it's just you and Bernie, would be to find somebody who's a willing dance partner. Okay, and you can be sure, at least in my experience, that a big insurance company or a big REIT doesn't have time to do this.
Right.
You know, they have you know, like a RioCan is a REIT. I don't know if you know RioCan, but it's pretty big. A RioCan is a REIT. And, you know, for them to take an 80,000 square foot warehouse like the one I just showed you and divide it up into, say, 100 800 square foot workshops and rent out all 100 of them and then manage it would be just, you can't do that. If you have a portfolio of 20 million square feet or 80 million square feet, there's no way you have time for that. There's no way. So this model that you and I have been talking about is very similar to Jen Walton's third-party Airbnb hosting. Did you ever see that, her presentation?
I did. I'll show it to Bernie. I can do the replay.
Do you still have the replay link?
Oh, yes.
So Bernie, this model is a riff, like you know, it's kind of a similar to what Jen Walton did. Jen's a young woman who was living literally in a storage locker. She was so broke, you know, broke as a joke, as the young people say. And she was living in a storage locker when she started her third-party Airbnb hosting business. So she went to large landlords and said, look, you've got a few apartments that are not renting very well, maybe bad location or too expensive or whatever it might be. How about if I take over the management of that apartment for you? I'll put it on Airbnb. I'll worry about putting the guests in there, and I'll worry about, you know, all the texts that come in. How do I connect to Netflix? Can you help me with this or that? I'll take care of all of that. I will keep 25 or 30% of the revenues, and you'll get 70 or 75% of the revenues. And what's neat about this, Mr. Landlord or Ms. Landlord, is your revenues will be higher than if you did it yourself, and with no work. And so most landlords said, "Oh, I really like this idea." And so if you had, like my friend Dan Dore, if he had, you know, who has 600 or 700 doors, maybe he would give her 10 to experiment with. He might say, "Well, Jen, you know, we'll give you 10 to units to try it, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll fire you, and we'll just have to do something else." And sure enough, over the next couple of years, it didn't take her very long, 2 or 3 years, I think. She's still a very young woman. She was able to, I can't remember what the number is, but Greg, I think it was like 200 or 250 units under management.
Yes.
And she doesn't live in a storage locker anymore. You know, and I think she makes a few $100,000 a year, Bernie, doing that for herself, you know. Now she works very hard, and she has a big team, you know, because Airbnb is a lot of work. You got to go and clean the place, and you've got to book it, and you know, you got to furnish it and repair it and maintain it. But she didn't have any money. So, Greg, have you got a piece of paper there?
Yep.
Or you take notes on your phone, or however you're comfortable. So what I was thinking when I saw your agenda is this: I would go to a REIT or a pension fund or insurance company, any publicly traded company, or any big landlord that has 1 million plus square feet and doesn't have time to do this kind of fuss budget thing. Find a building that they own, find out who owns it. Your realtors can find out who owns these buildings. You know that, right?
Yep.
I mean, in Ontario, I can just look it up on Geo Warehouse, and I can tell you any property in Ontario who owns it. And then you contact them, just like Jen did, and said, "Hey, you've got some empty space here on Ontario Avenue, or wherever it is in Saskatoon. You've got 10,000 square feet, 20,000, 40,000, whatever it is. Can I come and talk to you about a plan, or maybe over Zoom because it's a little safer? Can I talk to you over Zoom about what the model is and how we could work together?" For you to de-risk it, okay? So you know, Greg, I was in the mini office business a long time ago, right? So the model that we're describing here, Bernie, is like WeWork. If you know the model WeWork, do you know who WeWork is, Bernie?
That sounds familiar.
It's a co-working space.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
So what WeWork would do is, let's say you, Bernie, you and Greg owned a big office building. WeWork would come along and say, "Look, we're going to rent 2 floors from you. We're going to cut it up into little offices and co-working spaces, and we're going to rent them out, you know, on the day or the month or the week or whatever." And but one thing, Greg, you can't say is this is the WeWork model of industrial space, because WeWork is like a swear word today.
Okay.
No, WeWork is a failed business model, and we don't have enough time today to go through that. But you're going to have to trust me on this. You know, you can talk about Jen Walton's third-party Airbnb hosting business, Greg. That's a very good analogy. But do not talk about co-working spaces, because it'll lead to a discussion of the failure of WeWork. And
Okay.
they failed for reasons that, again, I know that model inside out. I know why they failed, and I know how to fix it, but we don't have time to discuss it today. All right. If you
Sure.
want to put that on the agenda for later, for another session, you know, if we had 2 hours, I would have enough time. But definitely don't say we're the WeWork of industrial spaces. People will say, bye, click. All right, that will be a very short conversation. Just so you know, Bernie, I don't know how much money they lost, but I know it's north of 10 billion US dollars.
Oof.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, of other people's money to lose. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is the best formula for you, in my opinion, Greg and Bernie. You go to this REIT and say, you've got 80,000 square feet or 40,000, whatever the number is. We'd like to lease all of it from you. They're going to go, oh my God, you're my new best friend, because there's so much empty industrial space in Saskatoon, in Edmonton as well, and throughout the West right now, as we're in a really difficult situation. So you say, yes, we'd like to do a lease, but this lease is a little bit different. What I don't want you to do is, let's say you had a 40,000 square foot a warehouse that you were going to lease at, say, $6 or $7 per square foot, triple net.
Right.
That would immediately put you on the hook to pay the rent every month. And that, you know, if you don't, you know, then it's a race. You know, you're trying to lease it up faster than your payments go up to the landlord, and that's a recipe for going broke. So what you would do instead is you would say, look, here's what I would propose. I want you, Mr. Landlord, to do the fit up. In other words, I want you to do what Shaddy has done with his building in Waterloo. Each one of these workshops here that you can see here costs between $6,500 and $8,500 to fit up. By the time you put up your studs and your drywall or your insulation, your electrical, equip it with internet and Wi-Fi, you're in for about $6,500 to $7,500 for each one of these, okay? So if you had a 40,000 square foot building and each one was 800 square feet, you know, you'd have probably 40 workshops in there with a little bit of circulation space. Well, last time I checked, 40 times $7,000 is, you know, about $300,000 of fit up costs. And you should check your wallet. But if you have $300,000 you want to spend on fit up, let me know. If you don't, in the lease, you say the landlord is going to do the fit up. So that's called the landlord's work at the landlord's cost. So, and he doesn't, he or she, they don't have to do the entire 40,000 square feet. Just like Shaddy did, he didn't do 80,000 square feet of workshops, he did 8,000. All right, so they do 8,000 square feet of fit up, so it doesn't cost that much. Then you and Bernie fill it up with people, you know, paying good money, we hope, for these workshops. So what you would offer the landlord is to share the revenues. And I think if the landlord does the fit up, the landlord probably should get 65 to 70% of the revenues, and you and Bernie should probably get 30 to 35%.
Okay.
So probably what you would do is you would say, look, on the first, you know, X number of dollars, you, the landlord, get 70% of the revenues, and Bernie and I keep, you know, 30%. Then as we get closer to, say, maybe half of the building leased up, at that point, there's you know, I would want you to step up to maybe 35%, or maybe if you could get it 40% for Bernie and Greg, and 60% for the landlord. So as you demonstrate more success, you get a bigger share of the additional revenues past 50%. Are you following me so far, Greg?
Yes. Yeah. I'm just
right.
writing it down.
And so what that means is, number one, you have no costs other than setting up a website.
Right.
And doing some advertising on Kijiji or whatever's big in Saskatoon.
Yeah.
So those are your only costs, plus of course your own time and sweat equity. Bernie, are you following me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the landlord's doing all the fit up and doing a little bit at a time. And you have something that almost no one else can offer, which is that to get immediate revenues, you could put some of your containers in there.
Right.
On the containers that you put in there at your cost, you flip the numbers around. You want, you know, probably 65% of the revenues from those containers, or 60%, and they get 35 or 40%. I don't know the exact numbers, and these will be subject to negotiation. But you could say, look, out of the 40,000 square feet, let's set aside 10,000 square feet where we can put some containers in there. I'm an expert. You are an expert in these containers, and we'll start to generate some revenues immediately. If there's any office space in there, like the ones that we've looked at before, there's a few offices. Again, that's an exciting opportunity. You say, look, we'll rent those out as mini offices. Again, you don't mention co-working. No,
Right.
your lips are zipped when it comes to co-working. But you call them mini offices. And, I was in the mini office business, as you know, and it was a very successful business. And then co-working sort of took it over. Co-working is a little bit different because it generally has these huge open spaces and lots of benches where people can just kind of come in and, in WeWork, you could drink beer, which is really stupid. To drink and think is a terrible mix. I don't mind having a glass of wine with my wife, in the evening on the weekend, but during the week, I won't drink anything. And certainly I would never mix alcohol and serious work. But I mean, that was just another one of their many, many, many faults. So we're not offering beer.
Right.
Or alcohol, that is ridiculous. If there's some mini offices, again, instant cash. And on the mini offices, again, they would get probably 70% or 65%. You would get 30 or 35%. But on the containers, I think it might be reversed.
Right.
And there's a couple other things that just this week we've added to the model, Craig, that you won't know about. This was something that Shaddy invented. Some of these workshops could actually be clubs, member clubs. And they generate really significant revenues. Can I give you an example of what he did with one of his?
Sure. Yeah.
This is Kitchener-Waterloo. You just bolt this onto your model. Now, this is something you don't have to share with the landlord. You could just, you could find a way to give them whatever their share of the rent should be, but any sort of gravy might belong 100% to you guys. I'm not sure about that, but it's possible. But listen to, I'll just show you what Shaddy wrote me. Okay, hang on. Yes, here it is. I'll share it with you, excuse me. So this is from my young client in Kitchener-Waterloo, and I'll just read it. Also, I had a revelation today when walking a prospective tenant through Samuel. That's what we call this model, Samuel. It's not going to make anyone rich, but I thought you'd appreciate it. Problem. I like golf, but I suck at golf. And I want to buy a golf simulator, but I don't want to drop $20,000 on a golf simulator. He could probably afford it, but he's an entrepreneur. He likes turning cost centers into profit centers. How do you do that? Here's his solution. I'm keeping one of my units, one of his workshops, and building an invite-only, membership-based man cave. The golf simulator, couches, small gym, TVs, internet, poker table, keg fridge, bring your own bottle, exclusive, monthly, invite-only, not to exceed 20 members. So he's going to charge $100 to $150 a month to be a member through the winter and $75 a month in the summer. He'll end up with $24,000 from his 20 members annually, and I get my golf simulator paid for free. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
So I stole his idea with his permission, Bernie, just so you know. I stole his idea, and Greg, you're gonna like this. Another one of your, so you could do the same thing.
Yeah.
You could have a unit. I mean, imagine 1,000 or 1,200 square foot unit making $22,000 a year. That's just one workshop, which you might get. You might get $800 or $900 a month for it. Times 12 would be about $10,000. Instead, you get $22,000. That's pretty good. And I'm absolutely sure. I told Shaddy this. I said you'll find that 20 members is not enough. You're going to go to 30. You won't go to 100 because that would be too many, but I bet you're going to go to 30. And he said, why? I said, because, people are busy. You can't go to your man cave, every minute of every day unless you don't have a job. And if you don't have a job, you can't belong to a club because you don't have any money. So I said, you'll probably end up with 30 members and probably closer to $30,000 a year for his one his one, you know, membership. So I'm going to borrow this idea for one of my buildings where I'm going to put a bunch of, you know, workbenches that look like this. I've got a hall of about 2,000 square feet that's unrented right now. It's commercial. And I'm going to put a bunch of workbenches in there and storage lockers, foot lockers like this. And I am going to create a makerspace membership. So I'm probably going to charge $135 a month plus a little bit of money for power. So maybe $150 a month. And I might end up with 20 or 30 members as well. Say I end up with 30 members and I'm getting 150. I'm getting about $4,500 a month. Times 12 is about, I guess, $50,000 a year from this 2,000 square foot space. And that would be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and there may be other clubs you could create. And wouldn't that be a cool thing if you had a building, and then who gets the revenues from the club, the extra revenues generated? I would think you and Bernie should get, if not 100%, pretty close to 100% of the additional revenues. But that's what you can put in a lease. And as I said, when we started this, there's no way a landlord could ever do even the 50 workshops or the 40 workshops. And then to make some of those into, you know, membership clubs is a hell of a lot of work, but it does, again, blow up your revenues.
Right.
Right.
And the commercial realtors that they have trying to lease up the buildings now aren't going to bother with this either.
Oh my God. You know, I'm a realtor too, so I probably shouldn't say this, but many realtors are quite lazy. And
even if they're not, the spaces are so small, they're not going to want to put in the time.
Oh my gosh. I mean, imagine, you know, if I rented one. Oh, by the way, as a realtor, I will rent for one of my clients. You remember that Aikens Road property I showed you?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, in Canada. Well, I helped because it was an experiment. This is now going back 5 or 6 years ago. And it was my model that they were putting in place. I did all the leasing for them in the first year. I'm talking about a 400 square foot, maker space that I leased to, you know, like an artist who does wood pallet furniture. Another one was 800 square feet. I leased to an Irish carpenter. You know, when you look at the commission I got on that through Century 21 where I worked, you know, it was probably a cup of coffee at the end of the day. It wasn't very much money. But I said to the guys, look, I got you into this. I want to make sure I get you out of it. And the good news was that was a building they bought, as you remember, for $250,000. And it's recently been appraised at $1.95 million. So that is life-changing when you do that kind of thing. But, you know, so I'm the kind of realtor, Bernie, that will do very, very small deals for tiny amounts of money. You know, maybe I got a commission of, you know, of $400, and then I split that with my broker of record. I might have got $320 or something like that. So very little money, but it did prove the model. And as a result of that experiment, I've got people in Long Beach, California, people in Arizona, people across Canada doing this, and I hope you and Greg will be doing this too. So that is the kind of lease. But again, Greg, you have to have a willing dance partner. You know what? If you go to a typical realtor who's representing a REIT or an insurance company, they'll say, "Well, no, what are you talking about? Percentage rent? We want, you know, $7 a square foot triple net. We want you to pay the operating costs. We want you to pay all the fit up costs. We want you to pay the utilities and the property taxes. And my guys will take no risk." So, you know, WeWork, to give them some credit, was able to convince many of their landlords, right, to put up very significant amounts of money for the fit up.
Right.
All right, it's called a fit-up allowance. They were able to do that. They mishandled pretty much everything else, but that they were good at. But I want you to try and find a willing dance partner who says, "Hey, this is really cool." And what's nice about this, and this is part of your sales pitch to them, if you found a REIT that say had, you know, 8 million square feet of industrial space across Canada, maybe in the United States too, and they like you and you do a good job, they can turn you loose on 1 million square feet of their properties.
Yeah.
We say, "Oh, this is awesome." Bernie and Greg are super great people, and they filled up a building we were having trouble with in Saskatoon. It was only 40,000 square feet. Can you help us in Winnipeg? Can you help us in North Dakota? You know, whatever. And so you could grow quite a big business if you could find a willing dance partner.
Right.
Is that helpful?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Are there any other questions on that?
Nope. That gives me a good starting point on that one.
All right. So one of the parts of your agenda that I didn't understand, I'm just going to put it on the screen here in a second if I can find it. Now here it is this part here. So we're not going to talk about Ninja for a moment, but you said personal real estate ideas need to settle on one. Can you explain to me why the one isn't number two?
It is number two. But I wanted to go through this conversation with you first to make sure that my thinking on it was right. I really think number two is the best approach for me for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
So these other ideas are just ideas that I've had over time, but I'm just going to sideline them.
Well, I mean, as you know, I like all of these ideas in here, but Bernadette, one of the things I've learned throughout my career is that the people who do best in business are the people who focus on one thing and get really good at it. You know, I as a younger person, I thought I was pretty hot stuff. You know, I was way too full of myself. That is a true statement. And so I thought I could do everything. And it turns out, even if you're fairly talented, you can't. And so now I preach focus, focus, focus. And by the way, I do take that lesson to heart myself. Like, I don't just talk about it. I do it for myself. Like, you know, if somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, Bruce, you ought to serve on our board of directors for this or that tech company," I go, no.
Mhm.
You know, you ought to invest in this tech company that we're starting. Hang on, let me think about that. No. My wife used to make me carry around in my briefcase a sign, a little piece of paper that said, "It's real estate, stupid." And because the only thing I have ever made any money at is real estate. And I owned a newspaper for a while. I owned a hockey team. I owned a financing company. I mean, on and on. I owned a sign company. Oh, Christ. I forgot about that. And all of them lost money. And so when people come to me and they say, "Hey, listen, we've got 5 ideas," my first advice to them would be, let's narrow it down to one. I think we have, Greg.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So you know, finding a dance partner is absolutely essential. And there's lots and lots of empty industrial buildings, I think, that you can look at. But you're going to need some help from a realtor. And the realtor, do you have a realtor in Saskatoon yet?
We're good friends with a residential realtor, and he's the fellow who put me on to Sean. Sean's my only connection so far as I have one other connection for commercial realtor.
Yeah, well, see what you can do. But, you know, the commercial realtor might say, "Look, if we rent this 40,000 square foot warehouse on a percentage rent, like, I won't get a commission." That's not correct.
Right.
So, you know, as a realtor, you know, most realtors think, well, I'm going to get, you know, 2.5% if I sell a house, right? So if I sold a house for $300,000, you know, I'm the listing agent, and Greg, you represented the buyer. As the listing representative, maybe I get 2.5% of 300,000. I get a commission of $7,500 plus tax, which I have to share with my brokerage. So most realtors, including commercial realtors, think like that. But you could say to both to your dance partner and to your realtor that we can just make up a number that the landlord will pay your realtor $15,000 lump sum for helping make this lease happen.
Right.
And you can go one step further and say it's $15,000, and that's going to be paid $5,000 when the business starts, $5,000 in 6 months, and $5,000 in 12 months. So you know, I mean, you could just make it up. There's no, you know, these guys are so locked into the way they've been doing things since the 1980s. In fact, probably to the 1960s 60s. But that doesn't mean that you have to. You know, lots of times people will call me up and ask me to do something as a realtor, and I'll just quote a fixed price. Oh, that's easy for me to do. I can do a deal points memo. I'll charge you $2,500 for that. Take me an hour and maybe two. And then we work through it. So it's a few more hours, but you know, I'll make an hourly rate that's okay. It's decent. And people go, oh, that's awesome. That's great. You know, and you don't even have to bother with the, you know, X% of this and Y% of that and all that. You can just make it up. And so you can say to your realtor, look, I'll make sure you get paid a commission. It might just be, you know, $10,000 or $15,000, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So are there any other things on the first part of the agenda? I don't want to run out of time, that you wanted to cover off.
No, not really.
What was
At some
the
point-
question about the ninja course, the assignments and the promotion?
Yeah, I was just looking at that. Because I'm not part of the group that's taking the ninja course, I'm following along as part of the coaching.
Yep.
Do you want me to be doing the assignments and sending them to you, or is that more work than you want to do?
Well, I think you should do them.
Yeah.
And if you send them to me, I'll send you the answers. You can mark your own.
Okay.
Just
enough.
assignments are really good to do because I know you're interested in coaching, and Dr. Yelland, I'm sure you'll make a very good coach. And my co-coaches are now starting to get some traction on their own, so it's pretty exciting for me. And what did you mean by promotion?
Sorry, I'm just writing here. I'm just looking at, I was starting to think about ways of promoting myself for doing things like the PAN reports and, you know, and,
So
the coaching business as a practice.
So for me, by far, the number 1 and 2, and they're really connected, ways of promoting yourself is through a webinar. And don't care what anybody says, your email list is by far your best ally in that. How many people do you have on your personal email account?
Hundreds, but I mean, I guess if I was to qualify that in any way, I could reduce those numbers, but
So you have hundreds. And what about in your company?
again, hundreds.
Yeah. So I have about 16,000 people in my email address book. And that's probably one of the most valuable things I own other than my head. And so what you would do is you would set up a time for a Zoom webinar. That's the way it's done today. And you would send out an invite. Oh, look, I'm doing a bit of real estate investing. I've discovered all kinds of really cool new models. I work very closely with Prof Bruce Firestone. You may have heard of him. He's the founder of the Ottawa Senators and also a really great guy. A super smart real estate investment and business coach. You can keep going. And no, but you use my name. I think it's useful. And you say, look, I'm going to do about an hour webinar, and I'd like you to join in. And what I do for all of the people, you know, that I have become co-coaches is I join that first webinar.
Okay.
Okay. And what you do to get your webinar populated is you set up a free Eventbrite page.
Right.
Do you know Eventbrite?
Yeah.
So because Zoom won't really allow you to, unless you buy Zoom webinar, and don't buy Zoom webinar, that is a horrible piece of garbage.
Yeah.
Just the Zoom meetup stuff that you and I are doing it is fine. You know, I think I pay $15 a month for unlimited Zoom time, and that's all you need. Don't buy the webinar. The webinar is actually it's like $85 a month, and it's actually worse. That is a bad product in my opinion. So you can just buy the basic Zoom account. It allows you to have up to 100 people, which is plenty. And but you set up an Eventbrite page. It's free, but it forces people who you know, to actually go on Eventbrite, put their name in, their email address, their cell phone number, and get a ticket. It's a free ticket, and it won't cost you anything or them. You'll have a full record of who's coming to your webinar.
Mhm.
And if you only get 10 people, that's fine. Because, you know, out of 10 people, maybe you'll coach 2 or 3 of them, and then you do another webinar and you get another 2 or 3. So the number one thing is to do a webinar. I have fantastic slide decks for that, Greg, and I'll share them with you. You can customize them, but I have fantastic slide decks for a 1-hour webinar that'll get you started coaching.
Right.
The thing is, though, that you will be presenting them, not me. Because if you're going to be doing the coaching and I present the slides, they'll say, well, I want Firestone.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, you're a co-coach, and that means I help, but you're doing the work.
Right.
And Bernie, just so you know, I get 10% of the revenue. So I make out like a bandit. If your husband signs somebody up for $850, I make $85.
Nice.
But that's in addition to the $850 you're charging them, right, Greg? You understand that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like Airbnb. They're paying it, not you.
Right.
I don't want any money from you. So that's one of the top ways to get the practice off. Now, there's one more thing that you probably should do, and that is you should probably borrow some email addresses from the BIAs. Do you know what a BIA is?
No.
A BIA is a business improvement area or business improvement association. Virtually every town has them. I'll bet you Saskatoon has them. Ottawa probably has like 30 or 40 of them. You know, so what it is they create an area within Saskatoon, and they create an association of businesses that support each other. It's called a business improvement association or a business improvement area. And almost all of those BIAs have a newsletter. Maybe it's a monthly newsletter or a quarterly newsletter. So when I started coaching, I went to the Canada North BIA. Canada, as you know, is in the west end of Ottawa, and it's a very technology-centric BIA. And they had about 20,000 people on their email list. Now, they're not allowed to give me their 20,000 email addresses.
No.
Okay, that's contrary to the CASL legislation, the Canadian anti-spam legislation. But
you advertised in their newsletter.
Exactly. I advertised in their newsletter. And when I called them up and said, can I put an ad in your newsletter? They said, what are you talking about? I said, well, do you allow any ads or sponsorship? They said, no. I said, well, maybe you should. You get a little bit of money for it. And, you know, it goes out to 20,000 largely tech workers in Canada North. And it turns out that tech workers, and don't forget, Saskatoon has a tech scene. You know that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it turns out that tech guys, men and women, are really interested in real estate, because by the time they're 40 in tech, they're considered old and over the hill.
Right.
And so by the time they're 35, they've made a lot of money. 40 or 45, they're getting shoved out the door. It's scary. And so they think, what am I going to invest in? Then they look at their mutual funds, which are sucking, and they look at their RRSPs, which are sucking, and their tax-free savings accounts that are sucking. They look at their bank savings account where they're getting 0.9%, and it's sucking. They're looking at their pension plan, and it's sucking. And so they decide on real estate. So I approached the Canada North BIA, and you know, because it's a non-profit, it's a non-profit. They have to go to the board of directors before they go to the bathroom, right?
Right.
You know, they have to have a board approval. So they said, well, we don't know if we allow ads. Well, I said, could you ask? So they did. And they said, sure. And said, oh, okay, so how much will it cost me to advertise in your newsletter? They said, we don't know. I said, well, how about $200? And they said, okay. So I put a little photograph of myself, you know, looking a little younger, I might add. So I put a photograph of myself in the Canada North BIA newsletter and said, hey, I'm Bruce Firestone, founder of the Ottawa Senators, and got a PhD, and I'm doing some real estate investment and business coaching. If you're not really happy with your RRSPs, your TFSAs, your mutual funds, you know, and all this other stuff, maybe real estate might work for you. And if you're interested, just let me know, email me. Email is really important. Don't put a phone number. You can put a phone number in there, but people, especially tech guys, they want to email you. They don't have time to call you. All right. So I put an email address in there, in my case, bruce.firestone@century21. And sure enough, I got 6 or 7 of my first clients came from that 200, maybe it was $250, I don't remember, ad that I put in the Canada North BIA.
Nice.
And, you know, I wasn't charging very much then. I charged $1,500 a month to coach. Now, not everybody, when COVID hit, I reduced my rates. But, you know, as you get better at it, you'll charge $1,500 a month plus GST or HST. But initially, you can charge $850. And, you know, a lot of people can afford $850 for 6 months. So if you put an ad in on Kijiji, it won't work. But you put an ad in a newsletter like that, it probably will.
Right.
The other ad that I used to run in the BIA's newsletter was an invitation to, you know, a free webinar. And that usually would get me anywhere from 20 to sometimes as many as 70 people to sign up on Eventbrite. So I can put a little newsletter, you know, another $250. I say, hey, I'm doing a free webinar. You're going to learn something about real estate investing. All you have to do is go to www.eventbrite, you know, Bruce Firestone, whatever, and sign up. It's free. And, you know, if you can get 70 people on a webinar, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Because you can convert anywhere from, you know, 3 or 4% to 10 or 15%, depending how good you do. You know, if your presentation is really good, you know, I've had webinars where I've had 20 people and I've signed up like 7 or 8.
Right.
So that's pretty good. So is that helpful?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So when you're ready, but you have to pass the exam, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, I understand.
You'll have no problem passing it. I'm sure you'll ace it. But there was one more thing I thought before we run out of time. John is joining us at the top of the hour.
Yes.
I wanted to show you and Bernie one other thing. I'm going to share my screen. When you move to Saskatoon, are you going to buy a house or are you going to rent?
That's the reason I wrote the Gigaplex in Saskatoon. I was thinking we might build a Gigaplex.
I think you might, but is there a possibility that you might rent as well?
Sure. I mean, I just had an offer to rent a place yesterday.
Okay, so I wanted to show you and Bernie a way that you could rent a house for free. Okay, this is a good friend of mine. His name is Sean, the Handyman. This is not actually a picture of Sean, just so you're aware. And his name really isn't Sean, but I've known him for, you know, a few decades, and he's worked with me for a long time. He is married with 5 adult children, lots of grandchildren. He's close to 60 now. He's a wonderful, wonderful craftsman. He's never actually advertised. His marketing is exclusively word of mouth. He comes from a long line of blue collar workers and has never owned a home and has never wanted to own a home. I asked him why not. I said, you know, I really believe in owning. And he said, well, you know, home ownership can have big unexpected outlays. You know, your furnace breaks down, you got to replace it. So what we did was we found a house, actually a townhouse in Canada, which he could rent for $1,600. But we made a deal. I helped him a little bit with it, with the landlord, again, a willing dance partner, Greg, to add a 1-bedroom basement suite. I mean, Sean has all the skills, right? So he did it for free. He provided his labor for free. The landlord provided all of the materials at the landlord's cost. The basement suite is now rented for about $1,400 or $1,500 a month. The landlord gets a percentage of that, 30%. So the landlord gets an extra $375 a month. So now instead of getting $1,600 a month, the landlord's getting closer to $2,000 a month. But from Sean's point of view, if you add up and subtract all the numbers, he's now leasing his own place for $1,600 minus the $1,460 he gets from the downstairs, plus the $375 that he pays the landlord. So now he's able to rent his own house for less than for $515 a month.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what we call an augmented tenancy. All right.
Yep.
And so if you're going to rent a place, I want you to make sure you put in the lease that you have the right to sublet. Okay. If there's, so what I would be looking for in Saskatoon, I'm just making suggestions that I think could help you guys financially.
Yep.
Look for a place that maybe already has a basement apartment in it. And make sure that you put into your lease that you have the right to sublet.
Okay.
And, maybe if there's already a basement apartment there, instead of giving the landlord 30% of whatever you get, you might give him or her 15%, right?
Right.
It's all
Yeah,
negotiable. But, because if we could have got the landlord down to 15%, Sean would be renting his townhouse, for probably about $300 a month. That's about as low as you can get in terms of rent. And it's a beautiful townhouse, by the way. So and I have clients, by the way, who have rented farms. They just liked the farm lifestyle because they wanted to raise chickens or graze goats or something like that. And when you put the right to sublet in on a farm, you could have a micro suite, a basement apartment, who knows what, and you could find all kinds of opportunities to sublet. Farms will often have a barn, and the barn is great for workshop or storage or whatever it is. And as long as you have leased the whole property and you have the right to sublet, you could find on a farm, you can find lots of ways to turn your rent negative. Bernie, you understand what a negative rent is?
I think you.
I think your husband does. Greg, you want to explain it?
That's where they're going to pay. We're going to get so much money in rent that effectively it pays us to live there.
Okay, yeah.
So one of my young clients, was an $18 an hour carpenter, did this. The farmhouse had an existing micro suite on the ground floor, which was separate from the house, had its own ingress and egress. It had a 2-bedroom apartment in the basement. It had not one, not two, but 3 workshops on it. He sublet every one of those, and he and his wife lived there. And like Greg said, they make money living there. Now you could say the landlord could do it himself, but landlords aren't that imaginative, generally speaking. They aren't. They just say, well, we want for the farm, if you give me $2,000 a month, I'm good. Can I sublet some of these buildings if I don't need them for myself? Oh, sure, no problem. So don't give them any percentage.
Right.
Right. Absolutely, just to take advantage of them. And then you got some guy in the workshop, another guy, for JC and Kayla, they've got one building which they just use for storing motorcycles and ATVs.
Right.
And I think on one of his buildings, he makes $15,000 a year in storage fees. Just storing ATVs and motorcycles. So I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities for you, but you've got to be patient and look for the right property.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else before we get going with Joe?
No, I think that was what we needed to go over on our end.
Okay. Any questions for me, Bernadette?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. There was one more thing just before John joins us that I was hoping to show you. There is another application for this model I wanted to show you. I may have shown you already, Greg, but it'll just take, we got 1 minute before John joins us. Oh, there he is now, but I'll show it to you anyway.
Okay.
I'm just going to make sure I let him in. Otherwise he'll get mad. I think John has a bit of a temper. All right, hang on a second. He's coming. There he is.
Yeah.
They would let you do that if there was.
So
You already thought of.
Yes, some of them, yeah.
So just I wanted to show you very quickly. John is joining us now, which is great.
Hey guys.
Hi, John. Just give me a second. I'm just finishing something else. I wanted to show.
Sure. You
Bernie,
guys can cut me off if you want again. It's
oh,
up
no,
to
no,
you.
no, you stay with us. It's not a, you know, it's not, this is not the CIA.
Okay.
Okay, but I wanted to show what Bernie and John, I'm sorry, Bernie and Greg, what one of my clients did. This is a kind of a very, you know, kind of modest looking building in a small town in Quebec. And it's just got a bunch of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments in it. It's owned by one of my former students. This is Eric Rossman. He's an architect. This is Eric taking a picture, and it's me taking a picture of Eric on the roof. But what I wanted to show you was it's just a very modest looking building. You know, here's the main entrance, and here's you know, the 1 or 2 bedroom units. There wasn't much animation we could add to this. Maybe add a tech package. But when we were leaving the building, I said to Eric, "What the heck is this, Eric?" And he said, "Oh, no, that's nothing. It's just, you know, the basement." And I said, "Oh, I want to see the basement." So you can see the overhead door here, Greg?
Yep.
So when I went down, this is the basement. When I went down into the basement, I said, "Eureka, Eric and his wife, Sarah." I said, "You guys, we just found the little leprechaun with the pot of gold." And Sarah and Eric were looking at me, "What little leprechaun and what pot of gold?" So you can imagine what I said he should do with this, Greg. You know what I said, right?
Yeah.
I said, make this into little tiny workshops. So what Greg and sorry, what it's the end of a long week. What Eric and Sarah decided to do, with a little help from their coach, was they divided it up into 13 maker spaces, little ones, about 275 square feet each, so not very big. Rented them out for about $500 each. And so if you do the numbers, 13 workshops times 500 times 12, that's another $80,000 a year in revenues from that building.
Yeah.
And it allowed them, when they got it reappraised, their appraisal went up by, you know, almost $1 million just based on the income from the basement. And they've got tenants now who can live in the building and work in their own little shops. And because of that you know, ramp down and the overhead door, they can bring their stuff right into the building and right out of the building. It was literally like finding a pot of gold under their building. So the kinds of ideas that we're talking about, including talking to John about, you know, has applications even in residential buildings. And Bernie, just so you know, one of my clients in Ontario has taken this model to large building owners who own, you know, large residential towers and have maybe 2 or 3 floors of parking underground. And what they're doing is they're going to the city, and we've done one here in Ottawa as well, where they go to the city and they get permission to turn some of those parking spaces, which are unused now because we have light rail in Ottawa, into maker spaces. And you know, one of my clients who owns some really big towers has, you know, I've been in his garages, which have 3 or sometimes 4 levels of underground parking, half of it empty today. So 20 years ago, they could get $125 for a parking space. Today, half of them are empty and he can get $50. So by converting them to a workshop that he can rent in Ottawa for $900, what's better? $50 or $800 or $900 for a workshop. Plus, of course, people in the building love it. And people who have an apartment and a workshop in that building, they tend to stay a long time. They're not moving. Mm-hmm. So there's more you can do with this model in terms of, you know, just being sort of, you know, without having to actually buy a, you know, a 25 or 30 story apartment building just so you could put workshops in the basement. You could do the same thing that we talked about earlier on the residential side as well.
Right.
Is it making any sense?
Yeah.
So the model has legs. All right, John, what are we going to talk about today?
You tell me, you're the boss.
Actually, the coach should not be the boss.
Okay, well, Greg, did you want to? I'm here just observing and speaking when I'm spoke to.
Well, I sent you both a set of the numbers that I redid yesterday.
Yeah, I've got.
If we were to rent the space from Lloyd's building, or space around Lloyd's building, a little bit inside the building.
Is it this building, Greg? Look at the screen here.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, because I think the numbers that you shared with me are this 2000 Ontario Avenue, correct, Amondo?
Yes.
All right. So when I saw this number, John, a cap rate, I don't know if you can see it on the screen here, cap rate
Yeah, I
of
saw it, yeah.
130.5%. I thought that will be the highest I've ever seen. So I was reacting in disbelief, Dr. Yelland.
I'm not surprised.
But that would be pretty cool if you could do it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Bruce, what we thought we should do is be a little bit more prudent in, you know, in our appetite, I guess, for expansion, because, you know, we don't want to be in a situation where one deal takes us down or out. And we felt that we just didn't have deep enough pockets in the market. I mean, if we had more money, I think we'd be able to do the Ontario or the Alberta Avenue one. But we are going back to this one because I leased some yard space from this gentleman last year. And he's basically doing a lot of the things that you're telling us to do now. He's got, you know, a number of different tenants in there, and, you know, he's broken it up into different, it's a very unique property also. And there's a lot of opportunity with this guy because he's looking for an exit plan. He's about maybe, well, he's I think he's around retirement age, 65. I won't say retirement age because, you know, and he's just a wheeler dealer. He buys and sells, and you know, so his space requirements go up and down. And he had talked to me about buying the building before, and
Well,
Greg and I, you know, sort of talked about it. We thought if we went in here and started with our concept and got our systems all running and everything really working well, it would be an easy step to take over the building.
So I'm with you on this 100%, John and Greg and Bernie. I think it's a really good sort of, I don't want to call it a half measure, that sounds wrong, but it's a good halfway point, if you know what I mean, to get to the end goal. So John, what we were talking about, I was talking to Bernie and Greg just before you jumped on, what I think might work, I don't know, what is the first name of the owner of this building?
His name is Lloyd Diets.
How do you spell that last name?
D-E-I-T-Z.
Oh, Dietz, yeah, okay. So what you might do is you might say to Lloyd, why don't we work cooperatively? How many square feet, John, is vacant in this building right now?
Greg, you'd know more about that than me. How big's the building?
16,000, and the last numbers I had, it was about 10,000 vacant.
Okay.
Now, Wallace is leaving, and I don't know how much Wallace has, but
All right.
Wallace has about the smaller portion, the original building.
So
40, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 square feet.
yeah.
Well, let's just assume for the moment, John and Bernie and Greg, that is 10,000 square feet. So what you might do, John, is you might create, you know, your company, Got Storage. And by the way, John, I love that name. Who came up with the name Got Storage?
Well, a friend of mine owns a company in Saskatoon here called Got Mold. And
that's awesome.
And then one of my dealers that I'm working with in the States, Cube Monk, well, they're actually like, anyways, they are working with a company called Get Storage.
I love Got Storage. So,
and then I just checked the URL on it just to see if I could get the website. And there is a company in the United States in California that has 3 outlets, and they're called Got Storage, but there's nothing in Canada. So I secured gotstorage.ca.
oh my God, it's such a good name. So
I know, because it has the storage word in it. Like, you know, when I started Safeco, the acronym was Store Anything Fast and Easy. That's what SAFE stands for.
Yeah, SAFE, yeah.
But the name recognition going to storage is not there. right? You think
Yep.
Safeco, you think of a safe, or you think
Yeah,
of
no.
gun
Got
safe,
Storage is, John, as soon as I heard that, I think Greg shared that with me. So you're going to laugh at this, John. I'm thinking Got Storage, Got Workshops, Got Many Offices, Got Many Contractor Yards. And then as a tagline, got it?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's,
You know,
that's
with a
brilliant.
question mark, with a question mark. So I think I said that to you, Greg.
Yes, you did, yeah.
Got Storage, Got Workshops, Got Many Offices, Got Many Contractor Yards, and then underneath in italics, got it with a question mark. I just think it has real legs, John, and I give you a lot of credit for it. And that, don't ever let that gotstorage.ca URL lapse. That is a great domain name.
I was shocked it was available.
I'm shocked that you got it, but never, ever, ever let it go. I mean, somebody will one day, if you ever did decide to sell, will give you $10,000 for it. But don't sell it. I mean, it's a great name. Okay, so what I was talking about, John, is something like this. Okay, this is something that you might talk to Lloyd about, and I'm just going to go through it again. And I think I got to make Dr. Yelland the note taker. You're the secretary, Greg.
Okay.
So you would go to Lloyd and say, look, Lloyd, you've got 10,000 square feet of vacant space. John and I have formed a company called gotstorage.ca, and we'd like to work with you to fill it up. And what
But he uses that storage himself, that 10,000 square feet.
Oh, so it's not available then?
Well, see, this is what I mean. The guy is a wheeler dealer. He'll buy like 30 dump trucks at an auction in Edmonton, and then there's a guy out here that's a mining engineering company. It's called Fortis Engineering.
Yep.
And I mean, I think the guy, he's worth 100 million plus, and he's partnered with this guy because he doesn't have any. The other guy that owns Fortis doesn't have anything to do with his money, and he just gives it to Lloyd to buy stuff with. So he'll have 150 like engines with generators on them or hydraulic packs on them that he bought for like $300 each off of like Suncor up in the oil sands. He'll bring them all back and he has them stored there. But then when we said we might want some space, he just like moved and cleared a whole area for us.
Okay, well, let me just describe what might work, and you can tell me if I'm off in left field, John and Greg and Bernie. But what I think, assuming it was vacant and available, if it's not vacant and available, this is not relevant. But assuming it is either vacant and available or could be made vacant and available, you would say to Mr. Dietz, we're going to work together to fill up that 10,000 square feet. We're going to fill it up with storage containers and also, mini workshops in some kind of combination. And we're going to generate significant revenues. How much, we don't know, but Greg has done a lot of work on it. So it's a pretty big number. If it's 131% cap rate, that would be the highest I've ever seen. But you would say to Lloyd, look, out of that 10,000 square feet, if we develop it for container storage and micro workshops, we can probably generate very significant amounts of revenue. And what I'm thinking, John, is that you just simply share that revenue between the two of you, so that you guys aren't, you're not obligated to pay, a certain rent every month. You're simply managing the space, marketing the space, leasing the space. And that's your job. All of the fit up is done by the landlord. And if the landlord does the fit up, John, typically these deals, you as Got Storage would get, anywhere from 25 to 35% of the revenues, and the landlord would get anywhere from, 65 to 75% of the revenues. And the reason that it appeals to landlords like Lloyd, if Lloyd's worth $100+ million, no,
Lloyd's not. His partner is.
Well, whether it's him and his partner, but if the two of them are worth a few $100 million or whatever the number is, or a few tens of millions of dollars, they do not have time to put containers in here, start leasing them out one or two at a time, putting
That's
little workshops in. They just don't have the time for that. They'd never do it. But that's the model. The other thing that I would like you to put in there, Greg, in your notes, is that you have over the next 3 years, as you develop this building into, you know, micro workshops and container storage, that you have an option to buy the building. He might give you that. And
well, we've already talked. He already offered me the building.
exactly. So you know, but John and Greg, it's your option, you know, not his. So you know, do you remember what the price was that he offered you the building for?
Well, you know what he said to me is, John, I feel it's worth about 2.5 million, but I would get an appraisal and we'd go by the appraisal.
Yeah. So what I would do is I would say, give us an option to buy the building at the appraised value less 5%, sometime in the next 3 years. So let's assume for the moment that you fill up this 10,000 square feet with your cool containers, and you've got a few workshops there. You're generating, you know, really decent income for both you and the landlord. You're sharing it, you know, some to the landlord, some to you, and it's, you know, it's really successful. And eventually, I would guess you would push everybody out of that building, and you'd have all 16,000 square feet full of, you know, these containers that you guys are experts at. You'd have some containers outside, you'd have some RV parking, maybe you'd have a mini contractor yard, who knows? Once you have this thing fully developed in the next 3 years, you have the damn thing appraised. And the reason I say, John, less 5% is typically you'd pay a realtor 5%, right? So whatever the appraised value is, less 5% is fair. Greg,
yeah, and the deal that he offered us was, he said, you know, if I could get 10% a year, I'll hold the mortgage at say 3% or something for 10 years. You know, and he was just throwing ideas out, right? So he's really easy to deal with. I mean,
so I like that. Just let me finish, John. So Greg, write this down too. John's on the right track on that for sure. That you will buy it, you'll have the option to buy it anytime within the next 3 years at the appraised value less 5%, with say 20% down. And he will take back 80% for 7 years at 3%, something like that.
Well, he didn't even want, I don't even know if, did he want any money down, Greg?
He wanted 10%.
Well, that's even better. So 10%, you just put as your option to purchase, it's 10% down. He'll hold paper for 90% for 7 years at 3%. It's fantastic. What a great, now, Greg, when he does a seller take back mortgage or a vendor take back mortgage like that, don't just do interest only. How long does it take to pay off an interest only mortgage, John?
You never pay it off.
You never pay it off. And all 1, 2, 3, 4 of us on this call we're all getting older except Bernie. And you know, I wouldn't want you to, you know, have interest only for 7 years. You know, you want to try and pay it off. So if you look at if your cash flow is anywhere near as good as what you've shown in your spreadsheet, I would have an amortization period at your choice of anywhere from 11 to 17 years, right? If the cash flow is really good, 11 years. If it's, you know, not quite as good, you know, 15, 16, 17, or even 18 years. But the 30 or more, even by young clients, John, you know, young people in their late 20s, early 30s who I'm helping with some coaching, I don't want them to do 30-year amortizations. They're bankers, they're accountants, they're bookkeepers, they're friends, they're realtors. They're all saying, oh, take a 30, 35-year amortization period. I say, to heck with that. You know, you're making real money now. You know, a lot of these young people are doing very well, even in COVID-19. Do a 20-year amortization. You're 30 years of age. By the time you're 50, the damn thing will be paid for. Don't wait until you're my age, 68, and you're still paying mortgages, which I am. You know, so it's the typical teacher, right, John? Don't do what I do what I say.
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of like a parent.
Anyway, but do you understand, Greg, that amortization is really important. And if your cash flow is as strong as I think it will be, you know, shorten that amortization up to really as much as you can, you know. To be fair, though, to me, I do have some mortgages now, John, with 3-year amortizations on it. So I'm almost done with a lot of these mortgages.
Well, I'm sure that you have them. It's only strategic that you have, for strategic reasons that you have them anyways.
Well, there's another thing that I should share with you, which is that there's some people out there that advise you to die broke.
Yeah, I've actually read a few of those books.
I'm sure you have, but
Yeah.
what I do, Greg and Bernie, is who's the cat, by the way?
That's Arlo.
Arlo. Okay. Does he play the guitar?
No.
Not very well.
Not very well. You know who Arlo Guthrie is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just, I have a cat too. His name is Sammy. He's actually sent an email. He did. I had an email ready to go, but it wasn't quite finished. And he got up on my desk and he obviously hit the right key and off it went. So he's my email cat. But there is another thing that, John, I'm sure you know, but maybe Greg and Bernie are not familiar with it, which is that John is right. Some of the mortgages that we have, I have, are strategic mortgages as opposed to ones that I'm trying to pay off. So let's assume that you have a building worth $2.5 million and the mortgage is fully paid off, and now Bernie and Greg and John, now you're 75 years of age, but still in decent health. What a lot of people do is they don't sell their buildings. You've heard me say this before. Is they refinance them. So you have a $2.5 million building. So the two groups here owned it together. You put $1 million or $1.5 million mortgage on it. It's doing very well. You take that money out tax-free. $750,000 goes to John. $750,000 goes to Greg and Bernie. And tax-free, you could spend that however you want. And when you're still young enough to travel and still young enough to enjoy it, you want to do that. And if you're passing it on to your heirs, you've still passed on a building worth $2.5 million with strong cash flow. And yes, it has $1.5 million in debt on it, but it still has $1 million of equity. So you don't have to leave your kids everything.
Right.
So you can exit without exiting by imposing debt on some of your buildings. And my wife and I might have done that once or twice.
So that was one of the things that one of the issues that Lloyd has is that he bought this building so long ago. He only paid $300,000 or $400,000 for it, and then he put up that other big addition, about 12,000 square feet. But he's had it rented out, fully rented out for over 10 or 15 years. So I'm sure he doesn't owe any money on it. I know that for sure. And he's sitting with this asset that his accountant told him when he sells it, he's paying $850,000 in capital gains.
Whoa, that can't be right.
That's what he said.
Well, let's just think about it. Hang on a second. Let's just think, John, think about it for a moment. Let's say he sells it for $2.5 million and his adjusted cost base is, say, $400,000. So he has a gain of $2.1 million. Half of that, which is $1.1 million, or no, $1.05 million, is brought into income. And if his marginal tax rate is 50%, he would pay about $550,000 in capital gains taxes. $850, I don't think is right.
Well, that's the number he gave me yesterday. But
yeah, I suspect that might be a bit of an exaggeration.
Well, maybe he has other assets associated with whatever. But anyways, it's a large sum. It was so large that he was trying to figure out what's the best way for me to deal with this. And I just told him, the Greg and I have a lot of interest in the building. We just want to make sure our concepts work first. We have, we're interested in leasing space from you and taking over the building as we, when you're ready, basically.
Well, I think this, John, I really like this new strategy. I think it's very sound. And when you do this deal, Bernie, if you could add to Greg's notes, obviously in this deal that you're going to work out with Mr. Diets, or hopefully work out with Mr. Diets, you obviously have to have the right to sublet. And you want to have that right to sublet without needing the permission of the landlord. You do not want to have to go back to the landlord. You rent a storage container for $100 a month. You do not want to go and ask the landlord, hey, is that okay? The heck with that. Or you have a little workshop, maybe it's 1,000 square feet that you rent out for $1,500 a month. You just want to be able to assign that that lease without having to go back to Lloyd. So that has to go in there, that you have the right to sublet without the landlord's permission. Just,
You know,
otherwise it just takes you too long to do a lease.
you know, and Lloyd is so old, Lloyd is so old school, Bruce. I rented some space off of him for a year and I didn't even sign any agreement.
You know what, John, I'm with you on that. You know, the other day I got into a bit of an argument with a client of mine in Quebec. They wanted me to sign a non-disclosure agreement for their super secret real estate project. And I said, no, I'm not going to sign that. Well, we're not going to hire you as a coach. I said, oh, okay, I got lots to do, but we really want your advice. Why won't you sign an NDA? And I explained it to them this way. I said, if you don't trust a person, they're willing to sign an NDA. They'll sign 10 of them, but they have no intention of keeping anything that they sign. So the NDA doesn't do you any good. If you do trust the person, then you don't need an NDA because he or she is trustworthy. And I'm trustworthy, I know that. And if you don't think I am, that's fine. But you shouldn't do business with people you don't think are trustworthy. That's it. And then I asked them, have you ever done business with any Russians? They'll sign anything. You could put contracts, you know, a foot thick in front of them. They won't even read it. They'll just sign it because they have no intention whatsoever. I've dealt with Russians of obeying any sort of law or contract law. They just will do whatever they want to do. So they'll sign anything. So NDAs, at least in my experience, and this is just my bias, guys, are useless. Now, I don't know why I went on that rant.
Well, because it's true.
Well, I don't know, but I'm with you on that, John. I have tenants in some of my buildings that I don't even, I mean, if you ask me to find a lease that they signed, some of my commercial tenants have been with me over a decade. I don't know. They just pay their rent.
Well, that's exactly the way I am with my landlord too. I signed a 3-year deal, and then after the 3 years, which was 7 years ago, I just went on month to month.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just there's a lot of trust. And like I said, if you don't trust somebody, don't do business with them. Like, I'm assuming that you like Lloyd and you trust him.
Oh, yeah, I've done a lot of deals with Lloyd because I'm a wheeler dealer too, and so is my son. He's 16, and we bought 7 or 8 different old vintage motorcycles off of him, and my son restored.
So, Greg, can you just take John and me through your spreadsheet and help me understand how you ended up with a 130.5% cap rate? In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to make you the co-host. I'm going to make you the co-host. So, Greg, you can share your screen, okay?
Okay.
Do you know how to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, because John, like I said, I'm delighted if you can get 130.5% cap rate out of you know, Lloyd's building, which would be fantastic. But that would also be an unprecedented number. It'd be like us owning, John, you and me owning a $500,000 house that we can rent for $650,000 a year.
Well, one of the things that it is kind of off on this thing is the fact that it's not all the income isn't based on the land. So some of it's based on our business, like selling containers.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So it really has, it's skewed a little bit. I would say that if you wanted to break it down for the land portion versus what we're doing in the office, I don't know.
Well, we need to see, you know, what Dr. Yelland has. I mean, I trust Greg. I just didn't. I just, when I see numbers that are that high, John, it makes me a little bit nervous.
Well, like container sales for one.
Well, hang on. Let's. Okay, boot it up there, brother. Oh, John, we lost him.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. My screen went all funny too. I lost you as, and it said safe driving mode for some reason.
Oh my, are you driving?
No, I'm still laying down on my couch.
Okay, well, good. It really makes me nervous when people Zoom when they're driving, man. Holy smokes, you know,
Oh yeah.
I'm freaking that somebody's going to have an accident when I'm on Zoom with them. So, John, what's new in your world while we're waiting for Greg to rejoin?
Well, I bought the house next door to me, and I had it. I had an employee that, you know, he'd been working with me since he was 13 years old, and he's 26 now.
Wow.
And in 2015, when he was like 22, we bought a house together. I said to him, he said, I want to do something else. I want to make some more money. I said, well, let's buy this house and let's gut it and rebuild it and put a legal suite and build a garage, kind of like along the same
Wow.
line you're talking about.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how's it going?
Well, we built the house, we finished it, we leased it out. And then he wanted to sell it. And I said, I'm not selling it because
Absolutely do not
it's
sell
right
that.
next door to me. So I traded him my crane trucks and my franchise for Saskatchewan and some other like assets for his share of the house.
John, if you don't mind, give me the address. I'm going to go visit it.
It's 1324. So I live at 1320.
Yeah.
And the house that we're talking about is 1324, and they're both on Avenue C, like the letter C, north in Saskatoon. And now I'm actually working on buying the one on the other side of me.
I'm going to go have a look at it. I love Google for this. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Hang on a second.
If it all works out right, I'll have 3 houses
Isn't
in a
that
row.
cool? So which one is yours?
The middle, okay, so that's the one we did. It was a 912 square foot bungalow.
Yeah.
And then mine's the big one with the car in the driveway.
Wow.
And then I'm trying to get the other one beside me on the other side too, with all those vertical
Oh
columns.
man, that's awesome. So, oh, here we are. Greg's coming back. So you're going to end up with 3 houses all together. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
No, you do not sell this one next to your house. What a gem.
No, I've had it rented nonstop for 5 years to these Filipino girls.
And let me ask you a question, John, while I'm looking at this place. Did you say that there's a workshop in the backyard?
Yeah, there's a 28 by, there's a 26 by 34, 10-foot high garage.
What do you do with it?
My son uses it for his restoration cars and trucks and motorcycles. He's got it filled full of stuff.
Wow, that is
Like he has, like in I don't know, when he was about 14 years old, I bought an old 92 Corvette.
Yeah.
And
so hang on a second. I'm going to share the screen again. So
oh, I
Bernie,
just got a message from Greg saying he's lost the connection. Please tell Bruce he's working on reconnecting.
yeah, I can see him now. There they are. Greg and Bernie, this is John's house in Saskatoon.
Yeah,
And
they know. I think they know it.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. But John was sharing with me while you guys were lost in the internet wilderness that he's renovated. He owns this house, has renovated it, and has rented it out. And in the backyard, how big was the workshop in the backyard?
Well, we built the biggest garage we could. It was 26 by 34.
Wow.
And it's 10 feet high.
Wow.
And it's fully insulated, drywalled, wired, heated, everything.
Wow. So is there a back alley here?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we have back alleys in our neighborhood.
Oh my God.
And you know what? I'm like I'm less than a mile to downtown, and I'm 2 miles to the airport, and I'm not even a mile to my office.
All right. So Bernie, can you see here, and Greg, so this is, I think, the house.
Yeah.
And then this, or is this the house in this garage, or did I get it reversed?
No, you had it right the first time.
So this is the house,
House.
and that's the garage.
Yeah.
Look at the size of that sucker.
And then this summer, I built a gazebo in the back for the tenants because of
It's
COVID.
fantastic. So Bernie and Greg, this is the kind of thing where if you were to rent something like this, as an example, and you had the whole thing, then what you do is is there a basement apartment in the house, John?
Yes, it's a legal secondary suite, they call it here.
So think about this, Bernie. If you had the whole thing and somebody would rent it to you for whatever, you could sublet with the landlord's permission the basement apartment, and you could sublet this enormous workshop, and that's how these augmented tenancies work. Are we clear as mud on that?
Yep.
All right. So Greg, can you share your screen maybe, and we could look at that spreadsheet together? John, I love that story, man. That is great. John, you have my email address, right?
Yes.
Would you mind, if you feel comfortable, would you mind sharing some pictures of that building next door? You know, the house, the basement apartment, and the huge workshop that your son uses, because that is a perfect example for clients of mine.
Okay.
Bruce, can it says it?
Oh, I have to make you yeah. I'll make you the co-host again. Sorry about that. Done.
So Bruce, this is an interesting house because the whole house is spray foamed, and the furnace for the upstairs is in the attic.
Wow. I use spray foam on a lot of my commercial buildings, and it's fantastic.
Well, this is the first house in Saskatoon where the whole house is spray foamed.
Yeah, well, I have commercial buildings which I've completely spray foamed the damn thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so Greg, help us understand how we get to 130% cap rate.
Okay, so there's existing mobile storage that John's using in Saskatoon with roughly 70 containers
Right.
at 100
that-
a month.
Yeah, and that's probably low right now.
Right. So that's 84 grand a year. John and I are looking at building some small trailers and putting some small storage containers on them, kind of like what U-Haul does with their U-Box, except it's a better size.
And they're
So-
demountable, Bruce, so they can just load them up once, and then all we have to do is take them off the forklift, and then they could just load another one on and go get more. And then we wouldn't need a delivery vehicle.
Can you say that again, John? I don't think I understood that.
Okay, so the concept comes from, it's loosely based on U-Haul's version of their U-Box.
Yep.
So it's a demountable container on a trailer.
I know what a U-Box is.
Okay, so our concept is the same as that. You would accept our box is steel. And they're charging $90 a month for their wooden box, and they're charging $20 a day for their trailer. So, you know, you'd be able to move your kid to college 3 or 4 hours away. You'd be able to come down, pick up a trailer with one of these units on it, and you'd be able to load it up your child's stuff and take them to college, bring them back the same day, and you'd have done that move for like $50.
Wow.
So that's one income stream. The second income stream would be you don't have a lot of stuff, but you don't have a truck. You need to put it into storage. So you would come down with your SUV and you would load it up. You'd pick up one of these things and you'd load it up yourself and you'd bring it to us and we'd put it into storage for you.
Got it. Okay, I really like it. I don't think I really fully understood it, but I've got a good handle on it now. Okay, back to you, Dr. Yelland.
So container sales, John's currently doing $300,000 to $400,000 a year in sales, and there's about a 25% margin on them. So I just split that in half, put $350 for sales. And then John, John, I guess you can, those aren't something that happen every year that we can count on, but it's been pretty stable averages, I believe, right? Correct, John?
Yeah, like last year, my sales were 2.4 million. So we just took a small average of what we thought Saskatchewan sales would be.
Right.
Now, Bruce, one of the other things that's incorporated into this number is the fact that we're going to be developing a program through Got Storage, where we're going to be selling these trailers and containers as add-on units, value added. So, you're not just buying a trailer, you're not just buying a container from us, you're getting the whole, add on to your existing business for, say
That is great.
$30,000 or $500 a month on a lease. You get 10 containers and 3 trailers.
Man, I love that model.
And you get the business model to be able to bolt that onto your self-storage facility.
Or gas station or anything.
Right.
Think about this. If you could bolt this onto your mini storage business, how many mini storage businesses are there in Canada and the United States?
Yeah.
Well, and this is where, so that figure would also go into that container sales. So
Would you guess that there has to, yeah, there has to be a few 100,000, I would think, mini storage places in Canada and the United States.
Yes.
I mean,
You'd be up
so
there.
what a brilliant idea this is. Okay, Greg, keep going. This is I'm getting it now.
So renting space at Lloyd's office, he's got a little outside building. It used to be a garage. Now it's kind of an office building. Yeah. And along the back fence, there's space to put 30 containers.
Wow.
And we will put another 30 containers facing them. So we're going to have 60 containers outside as well as office space.
Wow.
And that's very conservative also.
Yeah, we could probably put another 30 in there without making things difficult for Lloyd.
Well, and then Lloyd has already said that if we need more space, he'll just add on. Okay, he'll just say, okay, well, you guys can have up to here now, and it'll be an extra 300 a month, and then you can have this portion here. So that's one of the reasons why I want to work with Lloyd. We can grow with him.
Right.
Or not grow with him. He'll give us the space to grow as we need it, is a better way to say it, actually.
So that outside space is $1,000 a month rent. Then there's this typical insurance, locks, boxes,
Yep.
blankets, rentals, sales, that kind of thing. And I'm quite confident that this $1,500 number per year is low, but I just put a low one in there to start with. Then renting for another couple $1,000 another $1,000 a month, I think it was.
Well, there's a 2,200 square feet. It's basically one bay in his building
Yes.
that he'd let us have for $2,000 a month inside heated storage.
Yeah.
With-
So there's $2,000 a month outside and $2,000 a month inside. It's how we got to the $48,000 a year for rent.
So question for you guys, for Greg, Bernie, and John, is could you, instead of having a fixed rent, could you just do a percentage of revenues just to de-risk it for you?
I don't know if he would go for that, because then he would take the risk.
Well, he is sharing the risk for sure.
Yeah.
It just,
I think he would.
the only
he'd-
concern I have, John, is
I'd rather give you a better price on the rent than take the risk.
maybe so. I mean, look, it's up to you. But Greg, if you divide 40, if you go into cell number C16, go into C16, C17. Actually, go to C17 and go equals, and then go B17. Click on B17. B17, and then divide. Put your divide signal there, and then go B13, and then hit enter. So that is actually kind of interesting, John. Turn that into a percentage, Greg. You know how to do that? Yeah, perfect. Turn it into, just format that cell to a percentage. So it's interesting. And just go 1 decimal point. So go up and add a decimal point. So we'll see what it is. Yeah, well, it's actually 13.0%. So, Greg, John might be right that you might be better off offering Lloyd a rent rather than a percentage rent, because percentage rent could be quite a bit more than 13%.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to rent the space at a fixed number, just try and put in maybe 3 months or even 6 months of free rent, so you have time to ramp up.
Okay. Now the insurance, I just grabbed an amount, and John and I talked about this a little bit this morning before we jumped on the call. The insurance for us, this number is probably quite high, just for the the amount of insurance that we would need for the outside and the one bay.
Well, because Lloyd's insuring the building, we'd just be insuring our business against loss of income if the building burned down, or
Yeah, tenant. You're quite right, John and Greg. Tenant insurance is actually quite inexpensive.
So what I'm paying now, Bruce, for insurance for my existing business, and I have an office of about 2,200 square feet and yard of about, I don't know, 1/3 of an acre. But I have $5 million liability. I have like insurance in case the truck flips and their contents go flying everywhere. And, and that costs me, and including covering the office and everything, $1,700 a year.
That's incredible. But for tenants insurance, generally speaking, it's not expensive. So that might be a little high, but that's okay. Keep going.
Well, there's liability in there too.
Probably, but I don't think I think Greg's right. It won't be 8,000. Keep going.
No, I would put 2,000.
All right, let's change it. Okay, next.
John and I and John's bookkeeper / accountant, Barb, would each take a wage of 30 grand a year.
Okay.
Cost of running a website, some management some the easy storage solution software from Jimmy in the States. I know that this $6,000 a year is a high cost for that, but it's probably closer to 4,000 for both of those things.
Another thing I forgot to tell you is that Lloyd pays all the utilities, even for the heat for that other.
Yeah, I saw that. That is a really good deal for you guys.
So that's what I mean. He's so easy to work with.
The maintenance for the containers and trailers, I just kind of took an average because we don't have, there's probably very little actually cost for maintenance.
No, but Greg, you are right that there will be some maintenance. And I think
for sure.
Especially including the trailers, there will be some maintenance. But it's not going to be like, my truck or anything that, can have a $5,000 or $6,000 bill fairly easily because it's more mechanical. Then I put in 15% vacancy. And so our total expenses are 160 roughly. This is the 214 net. And the cap rate is where I might have taken the wrong amount because I took the net and I divided it by the cash required. This should be total startup cost.
I think that's probably right.
So
yeah, but I mean, listen, that's a more believable number, Greg. But even at 52.4% with a 15% vacancy rate, if you guys achieve that, this will be a home run. There's no question about that. Now, who was going to, what is this, who owns this business? Is it 50-50? What is the ownership structure?
Well, we haven't actually set the business up yet, but I would have no issue with that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so let's say it's 50-50. It means that if you just go back to the the wages, you're going to get paid $30,000, John. Greg will get $30,000, and Barb will get $30,000. But if you could generate, after all of that, 214,000, it means it adds about another $107,000 to each of your incomes. So that would be a home run.
Yeah.
That would be a home run. This is definitely a great opportunity. And you know, if my dad were alive, lady and gentlemen, he would say, you should snap this thing up. This is a tremendous opportunity. Thanks to John and you, Greg, for the work you've done on. But this is something that you two guys should now focus on getting a deal done with Lloyd and implementing this. This is a home run.
Well, we can, he asked me when we wanted to start. Oh, so there is one other thing about that building that I don't know if we told you, but it has a caretaker suite upstairs. In the
Yeah, I know that. Who's going to live in the caretaker suite?
Well, Greg had asked about what Lloyd had wanted for it for rent, and he said, around $1,000 a month.
Well, Greg, were you thinking, were you and Bernie thinking of living there?
No, I was thinking I might live there while Bernie and I are in transition.
Yeah,
we're selling our house here and moving there.
So one of the things you might ask, and look, I don't want to push it too far because this is a good deal for you guys. And John has a better handle on this than I do, but what you might do is you might ask for 3 months or 6 months free rent on the industrial space, but also 3 months or 6 months on the caretaker space, free. I mean, and then you pay your $1,000 a month for it after that. And again, you have the right to sublet it. So because I'm with you on this, John, having somebody live there, especially if Greg has time to live there, you cannot beat being on site to make a business successful. You cannot, that is an ideal situation. So if Lloyd would agree to give you guys 3 months free rent, or maybe a little bit more on the industrial space and on the caretaker space, it gives you 3 months, Greg, to move there, live in that space, and ramp this business up. If he gives you 4 months, that's great. If he gave you 6 months, that would be fantastic. But something like that, he'll probably, I mean, given what John has said about Lloyd, he'll probably give you the 3 months that you need to ramp up the business, and he might give you a little bit more. No harm in asking.
Yeah.
So, can you send John and me this revised spreadsheet after this call is over, Greg?
Sure. Yeah.
Just so that all three of us have the same spreadsheet rather than 3 different versions or 2 different versions. I have another question for you, Greg and John. You asked me, I think, in your agenda about licensing. What was your thought? What are you licensing here?
Well, I think what our idea was like, okay, so right now I have Safeco, and it's 100% owned by me, and I have dealers across North America. And when Greg started working with you, one of the things that you had asked him to talk to me about was, could he get a license from me to open as many dealerships as he wanted? And I think that was because Greg wanted to do something like licensing his business, Quick Store, or what is it? Is it Quick Store?
Yeah.
So then I said, well, one of the problems I have, Greg, is I've given a lot of these territories away already. And it's going to cause me conflict in a lot of different areas. And I said, and then we talked about, let's start fresh with a new concept, new style containers. And that's how the whole Got Storage concept came about. And we're using a different looking container.
Right. So if I understand it correctly now, and John, I may not, and Greg, I may not, is you're thinking about licensing the Got Storage business.
Yes.
So here's what I think I understand it now. So here's what typically happens is, first of all, you have to have at least one success. You can't start licensing, at least in my opinion, until you've proven the concept. People can, within the next year, I hope, certainly if you're doing the kind of numbers that we're talking about today, 50% cap rate, $200,000 plus net operating income, this is a very licensable business model that you guys have generated. And you can bring John up to date with a couple of little changes that we made to the concept before John jumped on the call. Right, Greg?
Yep.
So there's a few things that you might do that would push that ROI up a little bit higher. But be that as may, 50% cap rate and 200,000 plus net operating income, that's very licensable. And so what you would do a year from now is you would set up a licensing division, and you're licensing the intellectual property as opposed to doing the franchising. And Greg, were you on that ROI group meeting where Tim Reed presented Little Steps Academy?
Yes.
Okay, so John, I don't think you saw that, but I run something called the ROI group, and we do once a month meetups, and we always have interesting guests, or at least I try to have interesting guests come on and present, their concepts. Tim Reed from Calgary came on and presented something called Little Steps Academy. And what he does, it's a brilliant model, is he buys homes in the Calgary area. He puts an early childhood educator into the home where she rents a room, basically. And then they use it as a day home for children. They take in 5 or 6 kids at $1,300 or $1,400 or $1,500 a month each. So they bring in about $9,000 a month in revenues at each of the homes. It's a really good model. And he is going to license Little Steps Academy in Canada, the United States. Not franchise, but license the intellectual property. It's a very good methodology. So I'm going to share my screen with you for a moment, guys. And you'll see what he's doing. First of all, people have to apply for a license. And this is his form here that I helped him with. I'm just trying to think. I don't remember what the application fee is, but there's an application fee. Oh, here it is. A non-refundable review fee of $1,500 plus GST. Remember, he's in Alberta, so it's only GST, is due along with this application. If accepted, there's some additional fees. A one-time setup fee for the website, that's $1,250. A maintenance fee and some coaching that he will provide each of his licensees of $595 a month. A licensing fee of 4.75% of gross sales net of consumption taxes paid monthly in arrears, plus a marketing fee of 2% of gross sales, which is used to promote the entire network. So that is a very typical licensing deal. It's very similar to a franchising agreement, except that we never use the word franchise. We're silent. Our lips are zipped because franchising, if you wanted to franchise in Alberta, put $120,000 of cash on the table and add some fuel oil and burn it. If you wanted to do that in all 10 provinces across Canada, the United States, just keep putting more money on the table and more fuel oil. If you want to go into every state in the United States, they all have their own state laws. Franchising, if you're Subway and you're in every sort of territory and state and province, I mean, I can't even imagine what their legal and accounting fees.
Well, Bruce, I went through that exact same thing that you just said. I
know you told me that last time we talked, John. I haven't forgotten. And so Greg.
Yes.
Dr. Yelland, I am going to share this form that I created for Tim. I'm going to share this form with you, but and you're welcome to share it with John too. But I would ask you not to go beyond that. You would obviously have to do your own form. But this form is an application form that we've been developing and working on for a while now, because there's a lot of people interested in Tim's model. And he's going to have 72 of these homes in Alberta in the next few months. And this is a model that I think he could end up with 5,000 or more of these day homes across Canada, the United States, in a very short time. We're talking a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years. This is a model that could blow up into a business worth a few $100 million. So we've been working on this, and I'm going to share it with you, and of course you could share it with John, but nobody else. You'll do your own form. But this concept of Got Storage with all the stuff that you put in together is a wonderful concept. And to pay 4.75% of revenues to have your guidance, Greg and Bernie, and yours, John, as well, as people set up similar businesses in Canada, the United States, you know, a lot of people, and you guys know this, a lot of people are not cut out to be entrepreneurs. So like for somebody like me, I'm not interested in being a franchisee. But think about how many people I coach, over 2,500 people I coach, and I can assure you probably 3/4 of them are not really entrepreneurs. They need a formula. They need a proven formula. And to pay 4.75% plus a little bit of marketing fees and some coaching fees to get some coaching from you guys on how to do this properly and ongoing support. I mean, Subway does do a lot of training of its franchisees. Again, we're not supposed to use that. We'll call them the licensees. So training is really important. And to pay that money, and then be able to make $200,000 from a 16,000 square foot building, that's friggin' like a miracle. I've never made that kind of money, John. I've owned lots and lots of industrial space, but I've never owned a 16,000 square foot building that has a $200,000 net operating income. That just never happened.
Well, that's because it's our business included also.
No, I understand that better now that you've gone through it, but it is a fantastic model. And like I said, I will send you this licensing form or application form. You do your own, but that's probably a year away. Right now.
But Bruce, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
So I have 10 years experience in storage or more. Greg has 6, you know, and that include, and you know, we have the factory, we have all these concepts. Don't you think we're ready to license these ideas now?
Well, you know, I don't really know the answer to that question. I just know that if I showed that spreadsheet to, say, some of my buddies who own, you know, real estate investment trusts, and they have, you know, a few million square feet of industrial space, they would not really believe that you could generate those kind of numbers. They would not really believe it. I mean, you yourself, John, a few minutes ago said that Lloyd wouldn't want to take the risk, right? So I do think that
right, but this whole spreadsheet is based on us leasing 4,000 square feet from them, not owning.
Yeah, not 20,000. No, I mean, it's brilliant. It's a great model, and I believe in it. And it's up to you guys. I mean, if you feel comfortable and you're confident that you can license it now, then by golly, do it. But
I'll tell you why, Bruce. It's because we're getting calls every day for people that want containers, want our help. We're doing it all for free anyways.
Well, don't do it for free. Like, you know, I charge something for coaching. No, not very much, but I charge something for coaching. And you know, Tim Reed is going to do that. But he has proven the model. I mean, you know, he has lots of these day homes operational. So, you know, people want to come and knock, you know, come and see one of the homes. You know, they have to wear masks now. It's kind of crappy, but they still can come and they can tour and see how, because the systems that he has to run Little Steps Academy are really good. I mean, his systems work like clockwork. So, John, that's up to you and Greg and Bernie to decide when you're ready, you know, for prime time. Personally, I would wait a year, but if you feel comfortable and confident, that's fine. The only problem is if you license somebody and you're not fully ready with all your systems, and he or she fails, you know, today it is not hard to crush somebody's reputation.
That's right. That's right.
So I would just,
how about this? How about if we do a modified start where we put together the package for the trailers and the.
Oh yes, that I think you do that right away. That trailer thing.
But
that's a brilliant. There are so many storage people that want you to make that call. I'm telling you, John, that thing, that bolt-on that Greg talked about, and you talked about half an hour ago for mini storage, many of these places are absolutely desperate for additional income. That you do yesterday.
Right.
Right. All right. So, gentlemen, I have to go. Greg, send the spreadsheet, revised spreadsheet to me and John. John, I really would like some pictures of that house next to your primary residence, if you don't mind, including the workshop. It is a beautiful example of the right way to animate a property. If you feel comfortable, share those pictures with me, okay?
Okay, sounds good. I'll send them over right away.
And I will share with all of you guys, including John, the Little Steps Academy licensing application. It'll help you guys. It's a good form. See you guys. It was really nice to see you, Bernie.
You too.
Bye, John.
Great.
Bye,
In a little
Greg.
while.